Being a teen in the 2010s, I grew up frequenting the internet. I was into all the usual stuff a teenage boy would be into: creepypastas, strange internet stories, and most prominently paranormal YouTube. I watched a lot of investigation stuff and all those challenges that were popular. You know, the kind, internet myths or stories that got turned into challenges that could be milked for views. I'm not sure I ever fully bought any of it, but I do know for sure that I was too afraid to try anything myself. Nowadays, I haven't been into that kind of stuff as I've been busy with work, and I suppose I just grew out of it in general. I live out in the country in a very rural town. Only 300 people or so with lots of space between houses. I've always liked the quiet, even as a kid. No noisy neighbors or busy streets to disturb me. My town is only about a 30-minute drive from the nearest city, so I have to drive out for work, but it's not too much of a hassle. Anyways, recently I went out on a work trip where I had to be in a different city for a few days. The hotel I was staying at was a fair size with well over 10 floors, though I don't remember the exact number. I don't like to think about that place. I had already stayed there for 2 nights. On the third, as I was heading up the elevator to go to my room for the night, I remembered something. Seeing the number of buttons in the elevator reminded me of a challenge I saw a lot of back when I was a teen. It was called the Elevator Challenge. It was dumb as hell and no one believed it, but I couldn't help but think about it. As a kid, even though I knew it wasn't true, something about it still scared me. I haven't heard about it in years, so if you're unfamiliar, the premise of the game is to follow a set of instructions using an elevator in a building of at least 10 floors, and you will end up in some creepy alternate dimension or something. When I arrived to my room, I looked it up out of curiosity, and sure enough, the instructions were still available. I knew everything about it was bullshit, but for some reason a part of me wanted to try it. I think for my inner child or something. Since it was my last night at that hotel, I said fuck it, why not? I stayed up pretty late, around 2 a.m. in hopes that most people would sleep, and I wouldn't have to deal with restarting if someone got in the way. Hey, if I'm gonna do it, might as well commit, right? When I entered the elevator and hovered my hand over the button for the 4th floor, part of me was nervous. I didn't know why, but there was something uncomfortable settling in the bottom of my stomach. I ignored it and pressed the button, officially beginning the game. The elevator rose to the 4th floor and the doors opened. No one entered and I breathed a sigh of relief. I continued to follow the instructions carefully. 2nd floor, then 6th, then 2nd again. So far so good. I pressed the 10th and my stomach dropped as the elevator lurched upward. The feeling happened every time, but something about this time felt worse. Next, it was time to press the button for the 5th floor. Supposedly, a woman is supposed to enter, and if you speak to her or even look at her, something bad will happen. I pressed the button and the elevator moved downward, seemingly slower than before, though it was probably my nerves. When it went still and the doors opened, no one was there. I think I felt both relief and disappointment. I was glad to not have encountered her, but it would have been interesting if I did. I waited for the doors to close, but right before they did, I heard the thumps of light footsteps rapidly approaching the elevator. A woman practically ran into the elevator, and it was clear she was trying to get in before the doors closed. I think at that point I had totally forgotten the rules. I didn't say anything to her, but I did look at her. She wore a light floral dress and sandals, which stuck out to me because it was mid-autumn. Her hair was long, dark, and wispy, loose over her shoulders. I gained some sense and looked away quickly, making sure to avoid her face. I didn't get a glimpse of it and hoped that the few seconds I did look wouldn't ruin things. I quickly pressed the final button for the 1st floor. Supposedly, if the elevator goes down to the 1st, you failed, but if it goes to the 10th, that meant you entered the other dimension. Unfortunately, the elevator lowered, taking me to the 1st floor. Though I expected it, it was a bit disappointing. I left the elevator without looking back as instructed and headed for the stairs to call it a night. Something was weighing on me, though, as I walked. I wasn't sure when it was okay to look behind me, but as I approached the doors to the stairs, I felt like if I didn't look back right then and there, I'd die. It sounds crazy, but I swear that's what it felt like. I glanced behind me and to my confusion, the elevator doors remained open, despite usually being closed and already moving again by now. The woman remained inside the elevator looking at me. She wasn't standing creepily though. It sounds creepy when I explain it like this, but she was smiling. The smile itself was empty, and it didn't feel like she was smiling at me. She just looked simply content. She stood still but comfortable. I was too tired to keep thinking about the stupid game, so I turned back and headed up to my room for the night. The next day, I tried to push the game out of my mind. It's one of those times where you do something pointless and choose to pretend you never did so that you don't feel like you wasted time. When I got home, I went about my day as usual. There was an odd feeling in the back of my mind, but I ignored it. That night, I struggled to fall asleep. I had this odd sense of dread, but I couldn't pinpoint why. The next week went the same way. Normal days aside from an odd feeling, followed by a struggle to fall asleep because of a heavy feeling of dread. One night, a week after I got home, was when everything went to shit. I got into bed at my usual time, around 10 p.m., and fell asleep in a normal amount of time. No dread, no weird feeling. This time, though, I woke up and it was still dark. I looked at the clock on my nightstand to find that it was around 2 a.m. Then I heard it. The quiet sound of breathing. It wasn't my own. My stomach dropped and I started to panic. All I could think was, who the fuck is in my room right now? I don't know how, but I managed to calm myself down. I grew up in a very spiritual household. I was told growing up that if there's a ghost or demon in the house, to ignore it. That's what I chalked it up to. I don't know how in the world I managed to come to that conclusion. Maybe it was the past week of sleep deprivation, or maybe IW is just plain stupid. Either way, I went back to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, the breathing wasn't there. In fact, I had completely forgotten about it. That was until nighttime again. I was in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard it again. The soft, shallow breaths. That was when I realized it was coming from underneath me. I gathered the courage to look over the edge of my bed and I saw what confirmed my fears. Peeking out from under my bed were the ends of long, dark, wispy hair. I didn't dare look further. I slowly got out of bed, grabbed my phone and walked out of the room. When I looked back to close the door, I saw her. No, she saw me. Two wide eyes were staring deep into my soul. She didn't move from her place under my bed, and she wasn't smiling anymore. Her light floral dress that once fit her perfectly was now dark and sagging. I ran out of my house frantically, grabbing my keys on the way out and slamming the door behind me. No way in hell was I going to spend another second with that thing. I got into my car and drove. I drove and drove, not even thinking of a destination. I just needed to get away. I probably should have called the police, but that was the last thing on my mind. I've been staying at my parents' house for the past few days. I can't go back there. My parents got me to call the police, who searched the house but found nobody. There was no sign of forced entry and nothing to suggest there was a woman there. Not even a hair. The first few days I was staying here, everything felt okay for once. But these past few nights, the feeling came back. That unexplainable fear I felt every night. I'm terrified that I'll hear her again. I'm so scared. I think this means she found me again. I don't know what to do. I don't even know if she's a part of this sick and twisted game, or if I just happened to accidentally cross paths with some crazy bitch. I don't believe this was a coincidence. I shouldn't have looked at her. The instructions said that if I looked at her, I wouldn't be able to return to the real world. Maybe she wants to take me to her bullshit dimension. I don't even know. I'll cling to anything at this point. I'm thinking of going back to the hotel. Maybe if I do the ritual properly again and leave for good, she'll leave me alone. As of right now, I think I hear her breathing again. When I first noticed that my boyfriend was talking to himself, I didn't think much of it. Even I do it sometimes. I think most people do. He would do it so quietly I can't even say for how long it had been going on. Maybe he had always done it. His lips moved rapidly, and his voice was barely a whisper, so for a while I thought he might be quietly humming. He would look down while doing it, while scrolling his phone, or doing chores around the house. Maybe it was a compulsion, like a tic or even Tourette's, and I was trying to think of the kindest way to bring it up without it seeming like I was judging him. It all came to a head on Saturday. I was in the living room mindlessly scrolling on my phone while David was in the kitchen making us some food. Suddenly he ran into the room and stopped at my feet with a wild look in his eye. "Stop it!" He did not scream, but his voice was raised, like he was disciplining an unruly child. I dropped my phone on my face because I wasn't expecting him to bark a command at me like that. What, I'm not doing anything," I snapped back. I had no idea why he was reprimanding me for being on my phone. But his eyes weren't directed at me. He was looking directly behind me at something over my shoulder. I glanced back, but nothing was there. I kept looking between my boyfriend and the empty space behind me, trying to make sense of what was happening. He blinked rapidly and looked down at me. He seemed agitated. "I'm sorry." He shook his head and rubbed his temples. "I thought I saw something behind you," he answered slowly, still shaking his head. I sat up and snapped at him. "And what was it? There's nothing there? You scared me running in here like that," I admonished him. He kept shaking his head and backed away into the kitchen. I went back to scrolling on my phone, but I kept shooting glances at David and back behind me. It had spooked me. For the rest of the morning, his whole mood seemed off. He was jumpy and he kept fidgeting with his hands, something he only does when he's upset. As noon rolled around, I suggested getting out of the apartment and getting lunch somewhere. David quickly agreed. Getting out of the house did us both good. It seemed to calm him down, and I was getting cabin fever being stuck inside for so long. Walking back to the apartment, we were holding hands, and I was leaning into him. "So, are you okay? You seemed so jumpy this morning. Do you think you saw a shadow or something?" I asked, trying to keep everything light. He looked at me cautiously, as if he was weighing what he was about to say. "I think you're right. I think I saw a shadow or something. Or maybe I was still dreaming." He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I decided to drop it. I honestly thought he was embarrassed. He had gotten scared over nothing and was worried about my reaction. That night, I woke up to the sound of David talking. He was whispering, but the gentle drone of his voice had woken me up. I lay there listening. I had no intention of getting up or saying anything to him while I was still half awake. Once he stopped mumbling to himself, I would go back to sleep. During the day, I could never make out what he was saying, but tonight I could hear him clearly, even though it was just above a whisper. "I'm not going to do that to her, and you're not allowed to touch her either. You promised me. You promised me that this time would be different." His whispers were harsh and insistent. I almost said something. At this point, I thought he might not even be awake. Maybe he was talking in his sleep. That's when I heard a voice answering him. It was distinct and separate. My heart started pounding even as I tried to rationalize what I was hearing. This new voice, lower and softer than David's, wasn't like anything I had heard before. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone of it as it spoke. I couldn't tell if it was male or female, but it sounded angry. David shifted in the bed and reached over to touch my back. I didn't move, just lay there still pretending to be asleep. "You're wrong. She's still sleeping. She can't hear anything we're saying," David rasped at the voice. The voice answered back. I still couldn't make out the words, but it sounded both insistent and scathing. "Whatever. I'm done for tonight. I'm exhausted. You can talk to me tomorrow when I wake up," he hissed, and he lay back down beside me. All was silent in the bedroom. Minutes passed and David's breathing slowed, and he started to lightly snore. He was asleep, but I couldn't join him. I felt my pounding heart just now settling down into a steady rhythm. I wanted to push myself off the bed and inspect the bedroom, but I didn't. I just lay there too afraid to get up and see what else might be in the room with us. Eventually I did fall asleep, though it was more like passing out than actual sleep. When my eyes opened, I saw the morning light streaming into the bedroom from the window. I pushed myself up into a sitting position and looked around the room. There was nothing strange in the room with me, just a pile of dirty laundry that was begging to be done. I rubbed my eyes, feeling a headache starting behind them. In the light of day, I could convince myself that I had just dreamed everything or hallucinated. Just then David popped his head into the room and gave me a huge smile. "You slept in super late. Are you just that tired?" he asked, walking into the room and sitting down next to me. He had a cup of coffee in his hand and passed it to me. I took it gently and sipped. The warmth from the liquid was lifting my spirits. "I didn't sleep well last late. I think I was having a nightmare," I explained, sipping at the coffee. David furrowed his brow and rubbed my back. "Poor thing. You never have nightmares. Do you want to tell me what it was about?" he asked, still rubbing my back. I shrugged and kept sipping my coffee, wondering if I should confront him about last night or play it off as some kind of waking nightmare. "No, it's fading now. I can't even remember what it was about." I stood up as I spoke. I was getting hungry, and I hoped that David had saved me some breakfast. He hadn't, but that's just because he hadn't made anything yet. He had been waiting for me to wake up before he started on making something. I volunteered to make us some food, mostly because I was craving waffles and David sucks at making them. I started searching through the cabinets and fridge for what I needed. As I was busying myself with breakfast, I glanced up and saw David staring fixedly at the corner of the living room. His lips were moving rapidly, and I knew that he was talking to himself again. I looked away. It was too early for this. I was hungry, and I needed some more coffee in me before I could deal with any kind of crazy this morning. As soon as I poured out the flour and milk, David appeared beside me, causing me to jump a little. I snapped at him because he scared me. "Jesus, David, you really gotta stop sneaking up on me like that," I hissed. I was already irritated from lack of sleep, and now he had to startle me too. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his eyes darting from me and back to the living room. "But I thought we could go out to brunch instead." I shook my head. "I already poured out the milk and flour. I don't want it to go to waste." He licked his lips before speaking again. "Please? It'll be my treat. I just can't be in the apartment right now." He looked upset as he spoke to me. I set aside the poor half-finished waffle mix and sighed. "Okay, let's go out and get some brunch. I could use a cappuccino and a mimosa anyway." I agreed. David kept hovering over me as I got dressed as quickly as I could. I didn't have time to brush my teeth before he rushed me out the door. He practically shoved me out into the hallway. Usually, I'm all for a brunch date, but he was acting so erratic, and I was bouncing between being irritated and concerned. As we sat and ate our breakfast, I decided I needed to bring everything up. Something was worrying him, and the more I thought about the last night, the more this pit of worry was forming in my stomach. I think I just wanted him to tell me that everything was all right, that I had dreamed everything, and this was something normal I was blowing out of proportion. "Last night I woke for a little while. I thought I heard you talking to someone." I tried to say it as nonchalantly as I could. David coughed on his Eggs Benedict and gave me a horrified expression. "What are you talking about?" "I wasn't talking to anyone last night." He looked at me wide-eyed. He was a terrible liar. "Babe, it's okay. If you were dreaming, or if you have some kind of tic or Tourette's, it's okay. I'm not here judging you. I'm just telling you that I've noticed. And I think I was dreaming through part of it anyway, 'cause I thought I heard something answering you back." I reached out trying to hold his hand, but he snatched it away. "You had a nightmare last night." "I wasn't talking last night. I was asleep the whole time." He was sweating as he spoke, and his eyes were darting around like he was looking for someone. I sighed and went back to my breakfast. David sat his fork down and was looking everywhere except for me, his breakfast forgotten. I hadn't meant for this to happen. Maybe talking about this in a public setting was too much for him. After we paid the bill, we were walking home when David grabbed my arm and forced me to face him. His eyes had a glassy and panicked look to them. I felt a stab of panic and placed my hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding. "Honey, are you okay? You look like you're getting sick." I moved my hand to his forehead, wanting to take his temperature when he pushed my hand away. I think I should go back to my apartment for today. I think I need to be alone for a while, he stammered, backing away from me. Okay, but if you're sick, if you come back with me, I can take care of you, I pleaded. He shook his head. No, I think I really just need to have some time to myself. He turned and walked away, leaving me staring after him on the sidewalk. Both our apartments were in walking distance. One of the perks of living in a city. He was always at my place, so often we practically lived together. It felt unnatural going back home alone. I texted him throughout the day, but I got no answer. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. Any irritation I felt for him was gone and replaced with pure concern. As the evening wore on, I was preparing to go over to his place to confront him when he finally called me back. David, are you okay? You haven't messaged me back all day. I was getting worried. I was getting ready to come over to your place. I said in a rush. No, don't come over here. It's not safe. He spoke in a low whisper. I almost couldn't hear him. What do you mean it's not safe? Safe for who? You or me? My voice rising in alarm. For you, he sputtered. Why? You're not threatening to hurt me, are you? Or is someone else threatening to hurt me? I was shouting over the phone. This was so out of character for him, I didn't know what to think. We need to break up. He hissed back at me. You need to stay away from me. You need to stay safe. He sounded like he was crying. And with that, the call ended. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I know he did not just break up with me over the phone. I called back. Then again and again. Straight to voicemail. I sent text messages and messages on WhatsApp but got no reply. I spent the rest of the evening crying and only fell asleep after I took a sleeping pill just because I knew I needed the rest. Every message I sent to David was ignored. After a few days, I stopped trying. I had gotten the message loud and clear, and I wasn't going to throw myself at someone who wanted to push me away. After a few more days had passed, I started gathering up all the things he had left at my apartment in a box to leave at his place. I cried while doing it. Breaking up was always hard, but I had thought our relationship was going well. Dropping off the box was harder than I had expected. I sent him a text letting him know his stuff was outside his door. At this point, I was certain I was blocked, but in case he wasn't, I wanted to give him a heads up. I lingered outside his door for several minutes. Part of me wanted to knock and see if he was home. Finally, I just turned and walked away. If he wanted to talk to me, he knew where I lived, and he had my number. Come to think of it, I still needed to get my apartment key back from him. That night, I was laying on my couch half watching a movie while I scrolled through my phone. I was deleting all the pictures of me and David. Hello there, Amber. A soft voice purred from somewhere behind me. I gasped and leapt off the couch, clutching my phone to my chest. It sounded like someone was right beside my ear, but there was nothing. My eyes darted to the TV screen. Maybe I had heard it from there? But no one in the movie I was watching was named Amber. My heart was pounding as I tried to rationalize what I had heard. Immediately I thought of David, and his weird tic, and the voice I had heard that night. I ended up staying awake most of the night. I was scared. I didn't want to be. What I was feeling was irrational, but that didn't mean it wasn't happening. I got up to leave the apartment, but I ended up just sitting back down again. Where was I going to go? It was the middle of the night, and besides a few all-night diners, everything was closed. I didn't relish the thought of sitting on an uncomfortable bar stool sipping coffee waiting till morning. Staying home seemed like the best option. I even thought about messaging David, but I stopped myself. He wasn't going to answer me anyway. I stay on that couch till the first rays of light started to peek through the blinds. I smiled. The sunshine calmed my nerves, and I felt myself finally relaxing and drifting off to an exhausted sleep. As I closed my eyes and curled into the warmth of the sofa, I felt a hand gently pressing onto my back, the hint of claws digging through the fabric of my shirt. Don't go to sleep yet, Amber. We have so much to talk about, the voice whispered. My wife has insomnia and does chores when she can't sleep. It's been that way for so long that I've stopped noticing. Usually I don't even wake up. But a few nights in a row, she started running the garbage disposal a lot. Off and on through the night, sometimes for a minute or two. Of course I couldn't sleep through that. So late one night, I went downstairs to check on her. She was in her PJs and bent over the sink, staring into the drain. She was leaning in so close that some of her hair had piled up in the bottom of the sink. "You lose something?" I asked. She gasped and snapped up when she heard me. "You scared me," she said. She did look jumpy, which made me uneasy too. I saw that she was holding something and asked her what it was. "Nothing, a slice of turkey," she said, guilty. She had balled it up into a gray-pink blob from squeezing it so hard. "That doesn't go in the garbage disposal," I said. I didn't know what else to say. "Right, I'm half asleep." She dropped it into the trash under the sink. There was a pack of sliced turkey on the counter, already half-eaten. Why did we have it? I was the one who ate lunch meat. But I hated turkey. I didn't remember telling her to pick up any. "Hungry?" she asked. She had seen where I was looking. "No," I said. My body had gone cold. Something felt seriously wrong here. She nonchalantly turned around and put the lunch meat back in the fridge. Then, with her back still facing me, she said, "Actually, I did lose something in the sink. A gemstone in my ring." She turned around and shrugged. "I'm an idiot, sorry. Which did you lose?" I asked, trying to sound nice. I had never talked to her while she was in one of her insomnia spells. It was more like she was sleepwalking, or as if I were talking to a stranger, a woman who only looked like my wife and had wandered into my house. "A little one here," she said, pointing at her ring. "You wouldn't have noticed it. It's really small. You can barely even see where it's supposed to go." I doubted that I wouldn't have noticed it. I had bought her the ring, but the kitchen was too dark for me to see clearly. "You want me to fish it out for you?" I said. She smiled. "Sure," I said, going over to the sink. I felt a sudden panicked urge to run back upstairs. But I pushed that feeling down. I loved my wife. I trusted her even when she was maybe half lying. I reached my hand inside the drain. It was damp and warmer in there than I had expected. The bumpy edge of the blade was almost hot. The metal must have heated up from the garbage disposal running for so long. "It's really small," she said. She came over to watch and leaned against the wall. The switch for the garbage disposal was next to her shoulder. I almost told her to be careful, but didn't. I didn't want to seem controlling. She smiled again at me. I poked around the sides of the garbage disposal container. Everything I touched soggy and soft, old scraps of food. The container felt like it was made of rubber. I had thought it would be metal or hard plastic, but the sides gave slightly when I pushed, and they were strangely warm. My wife was watching me intensely, her shoulder now on the edge of the light switch panel. My finger brushed something hard, and she moved her arm, the arm that was on the switch, and I ripped my hand out of the drain. "What?" she asked. "Did you cut yourself?" "I'm fine," I managed to say. My voice was shaking. "Was she really going to flip the switch, you are?" she asked. "Yes, I'm fine. I couldn't find anything." "Sorry, that's okay," she said, yawning. She went back up to bed. She moved slowly, oblivious to her surroundings. Maybe she was sleepwalking. I followed her upstairs and found her already asleep. I couldn't make myself get into bed with her. None of it had made any sense. Her running the disposal, the meat, her lie about the ring. So I snuck back downstairs. The sink looked the same as before. A few drops of water around the rim, a waxy smear of grease on the stainless steel. I put my hands on either side of the drain and stared into the black hole. There was nothing unusual about it, other than the vague threat of something sharp hiding out of sight in the dark. But then I heard a low, soft gurgling sound in the drain. I bent over and lowered my ear to the drain to listen better. Maybe it was water moving through the pipes, but this sounded more organic, like the gurgling sound a baby might make. And I realized that my ear felt warm. Warm air was wafting out of the drain every few seconds, as if the hole were breathing. I pulled away from the sink. Nothing came chasing after me, just to see what would happen. I got out a slice of turkey and pushed it down into the drain with my finger. As soon as the meat had slipped past the drain flaps, the garbage disposal roared to life. The metallic grinding noise rattled through the house. I probably screamed, but I couldn't hear anything over the harsh, wet grating sound. Finally, it stopped. My heart pounding, I took all the turkey that was left and dropped it on the drain, then got a wooden spoon and pushed it down into the hole. The garbage disposal turned back on again, and I ripped the spoon out. The end was gnawed to splinters. I'm not sure how long I stood there, watching the drain and listening to the blade chew up the meat. A minute, maybe. Then the faucet was running too. My wife was there. She had come down without me noticing. The water gushed loudly into the drain and choked down the pipes. The garbage disposal soon stopped, and she turned off the water. "The water helps the food go down," she explained. I was too stunned to move, and she grabbed me by the arms, talking so quickly I couldn't get a word in. It had started a few nights ago, when she had fed the drain some crumbs from the counter. Then she fed it more and noticed that it liked meat. So she got more meat. Whatever it was, the thing down in the drain, whatever it was doing, growing, nesting, it was getting more active because of the food. And that meant it was getting hungrier, which meant more food. She apologized for putting so many groceries on the card. But it had been worth it. She had tamed the thing. "That's why I knew you'd be safe earlier," she said. "I'll show you." She got a bag of sugar out of the pantry, wet her hand under the faucet, and dunked it into the bag. She pulled her hand out, and it was completely covered in sugar. Then she stuck her hand down the drain. "Stop!" I screamed. She pulled her hand back out. It was perfectly fine and perfectly clean, not a speck of sugar left. "See," she said. "He won't bite, and it feels good." She sugared up her hand again and stuck it back in the drain. "Kind of tickles, and it's so warm." I couldn't speak. "You want to try?" she asked, and she got my hand wet under the faucet too, and dunked it into the sugar. I let her. I was curious, honestly more curious than afraid. And then my hand went into the drain. There was a loud, sickening crunch. I remember that, but I don't remember anything after, or even how the pain, the adrenaline and shock blocked everything out. I must have somehow tied a tourniquet on and called an ambulance. It's funny. I close my eyes and I can't even picture the stump. It's still wrapped up. Or the blood. There must have been lots of blood. But it's all cleaned up now and I can't picture any of it. Nobody could find the hand anywhere. Nobody can find my wife either. She took the cash, the jewelry, the second car. All of it mine. The cops put out an alert for the car. I don't know. It's all so screwed up. Today I had a plumber come by to check out the garbage disposal. He had never seen anything like it. The shredder and motor were never installed. It's basically an empty container sitting under the drain. "And you said it was working?" he asked, doubtful. "Yeah," I told him. "My wife used it for years."